And we are live. Hello, everyone. This is Tally Sim McKnight, and we continue our Shem Angel series, and we're going a little bit to earlier material. Last year, I went through each and every one of the Shem Angels, and I have a playlist on my channel, and I went through each of the 72 Shem Angels, going through Renaissance sources. Cornelius Agrippa, Johann Reuchlin, Athanasius Kircher, who gave us the typical tree of life that you see in a lot of a lot of people use nowadays. But there are earlier sources before the Renaissance. There are earlier sources. For this, we'd have to go back a few centuries more to the Zohar, to the Sefer HaBahir, to the writings of Abraham Abulafia, to Sefer Raziel HaMalak. So we're going to earlier sources. So this is long before Agrippa or Reuchlin or Athanasius Kircher talking about the 72 Shem angels. And this is the earlier Kabbalistic material on the 72 divine names. Something very important to understand is that the word Shem means name. Literally, the word Shem in Hebrew means name. So every time you say Shem angel, you're saying name angel, angel of the name. Shem angels. Where did the Shem angels come from? If we read Agrippa and we read these Renaissance sources on the 72 Shem angels, they all talk about how the 72 Shem angels are extracted Kabbalistically from 3 verses in Exodus chapter 14, verses 19, 20, and 21. Each one of these verses has 72 letters. And this is where we get the name. By adding El or Yah, you get the names of the 72 Shem angels. But they're derived from the 72 divine names. So let's take a look at the sources of the Shem angels. Let's take a look. Again, we went through the Renaissance sources last year, and now we're going to some of the medieval sources on the 72 divine names. By the way, the Hebrew name for the book of Exodus is Shemot. That's what you call Exodus, is Shemot, the names. Exodus is literally the book of the names. So there are a lot of Kabbalistic secrets there. And the 72 Shem angels are often called Kabbalistic angels, or angels of the Kabbalah. There's a reason for that. And there's a reason that much later in the 19th century, Lazar Lenain, his text on the Shem angels is Science of the Kabbalah. Because the earliest sources for the 72 divine names and all of that comes from the Zohar, the book of splendor, the Zohar, said to have been written by the sage Akiva, Rabbi Akiva, but it probably was written in the 13th century by Moses de Leon. That's a hotly debated topic. But we know in the 13th century in the Zohar, the source par excellence of the Kabbalah, the Zohar, talks about the 72 Shemot, the 72 divine names. Particularly in Zohar Beshalach 14, goes over the 72 divine names. And it even associates the first verse of 72 letters as being associated with Chesed, The next verse, which is written the opposite way from left to right with Gevurah, and the third and last verse with Tiferet. So it's pretty interesting. So the Zohar talks about the 72 divine names, and then earlier in the 12th century, the Sefer HaBahir, the Book of Brightness, or the Book of Illumination, talks about the 72 divine names, or Shemot. Interestingly, both the Zohar and the Bahir, two of these earliest texts of Kabbalah proper, the Sefer Yetzirah being a kind of proto-Kabbalah, Kabbalah proper with the Bahir and the Zohar. It's interesting. Those two texts talk about reincarnation, Gilgalim, reincarnation of souls and stuff. So it's not really related to the 72 divine names. It just hit me that those two texts talk about reincarnation and transmigration. It also talks about the 72 divine names. So we have the Bahir, the Zohar, we have Sefer Raziel Hamalach in the 13th century, talking about the 72 divine names and their powers. And then also we have the writings of Abraham Abulafia in the 13th century. And Abraham Abulafia is very important for the Kabbalah because he goes into the meditative techniques of the Kabbalah. Let's see here. NetMat MF 3GZ says, just joined your Patreon today. Yeah, thank you so much. I saw that. I saw that someone joined my Patreon by the name of Air. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoy being on my Patreon. I hope it's of some value to you. Half of my videos go there. So today we're taking a look at Shem Angel number 3, Sitael. And also we're going into this earlier material, centuries before Cornelius Agrippa in the 1500s, centuries before Johann Reuchlin, who's kind of a touchy subject, that person, centuries before Athanasius Kircher. We're talking about Sefer Raziel Hamalach, 13th century text. We're talking about Abraham Abulafia. We're talking about the Zohar. We're talking about the Bahir. These early Kabbalistic texts that really break down these 72 divine names. So we're going to take a look at it, y'all. Abulafia was important. Now, there are different ways, there are different types of Kabbalah. And I promise, I'm going to get to Sitael, Shem Angel 3 in a moment. But I want to give a little backstory a little bit to kind of understand that there are earlier medieval sources, Kabbalistic sources for the 72 divine names. Again, the word Shem in Hebrew means name. Literally, every time you say the word Shem Angel, you're saying name angel, angels of the name. It's important to understand the 72 divine names because by adding El or Yah, you get the angel of the name. So the angel is an angelic embodiment of the divine aspect of the name. Not understanding the earlier sources that are medieval, not understanding the earlier sources, centuries earlier, talking about the powers of the divine name. If you don't have that background in understanding the Shem angels, it's like learning about or studying Jupiter El. Let's say there's an angel called Jupiter El, angel of Jupiter, and yet you have no understanding of Jupiter. That angel is an embodiment of Jupiter. You should probably understand a little bit about what Jupiter represents. And so, it was fun. Last year we went through all these Renaissance sources, and now we're going back a few centuries earlier. into some of the medieval sources. So that's going to be really fun. But there are different types of Kabbalah. There is the theoretical Kabbalah, which is like talking about Sephirot and paths and worlds, four worlds, Atzilut, Bria, Yetzir, and Asira, and talking about Gematria. All this is theoretical Kabbalah, thinking about stuff. You have to understand, thinking about things is not a direct experience. There's a difference between knowledge, which is reading books and accumulation of facts, and knowing, direct knowing. Or you could even say gnosis, direct knowing, a Greek term. It's no longer just theoretical. Instead of reading a book on swimming, it's jumping in the water. So there's the theoretical Kabbalah, very intellectual. And the second type of Kabbalah is the meditative Kabbalah, the ecstatic, sometimes called the prophetic Kabbalah. It's a technique that is not New Age, not modern. It actually goes back many, many centuries of methods of meditation that help us to directly access these higher worlds, higher realms of consciousness. So you could interact with these higher worlds through thinking about stuff, theoretical Kabbalah, and you could interact with these higher worlds through ceremonies, through ritual, the regalia of ceremonial work. And you could also interact through an internal meditative approach, the ecstatic or prophetic Kabbalah, direct seeing within your own spirit. So, hey, how are you doing, Jeffrey? It's great to see you here, man. It's always a pleasure. And I just want to say thank you again to NetMatt for joining my Patreon today. It means a lot. So, the ecstatic or meditative Kabbalah, Abraham Abulafia in the 13th century, he goes through these methods of visualizing the Hebrew letters. Again, this is not modern New Age. It's not like we're just inserting these modern practices. These go back, it's very ancient, very old. You go back 1,000 years and probably much more. People were visualizing Hebrew letters. They were doing vocalizations. They were doing breathing exercises. But Abraham Abulafia, in his work, Hayat Olam Haba, The Life of the World to Come, is a 13th century text where he talks about the powers of the 72 divine names and how to vocalize them combined with breathing and head movements and all of this type of stuff. He even refers to, during these repetitions, you might notice that you're leaving your body. And that means you might need to take a break. You're leaving your body as you do this. And he goes in how to use base vowels to pronounce the 72 divine names. And then, of course, we have the third type of Kabbalah, which are like things like amulets and talismans and evocation, things like that. So you get the idea. Shem angel. Literally, Shem means name. They're literally name angels. They're angels of the name. Each Shem angel embodies the attributes of the divine name. And you have an understanding that the Shem angel names come from the same source. You just add El or Yah. So the divine name becomes an angel of the name. So Vehuya is the angel associated with Vav He Vav, etc., etc. Sitael, the angel we're talking about today, is associated with the third divine name, Samek Yud Tet, the three Hebrew letters that represent the name. So I'm going to talk a little bit about pronunciation. There's a difference in pronunciation. Okay. With a study like this, which I don't consider myself any kind of scholar or anything else. I'm just a seeker. I mean, I do take the study seriously, but I admit what I don't know. But any kind of study like this that goes back many, many centuries, you're going to get a lot of twists and turns, so it gets a little complex. The angel name is often pronounced differently than the divine name. How do we know this? Well, every time we look in Agrippa, we look in Johann Reuchlin, we look in Dr. Rudd, we look in these early sources. There's some other, the Divine Cabal. You know, we go through the Renaissance sources, and then later on the Divine Cabal, which is an actual like dream grimoire with the Shem angels. And then later on with Lazar Lenain, we have how they're pronounced with the Latin letters. It's pretty consistent. Vehuya, pretty consistent. Yeliel, pretty consistent. Sitael. We see in Latin letters, we know the vocalization of the Shem angel is Sitael, from Agrippa through Dr. Rudd, through Reuchlin, through all these sources. We have the Latin letters. We know it's pronounced Sitael. However, there's a difference in pronouncing the divine names. For this, you use what's called base vowels. Base vowels. And it goes like this. I talked about it in a recent video. You take the name of the letter, like bet. Second letter of the Hebrew alphabet, bet. It's a consonant. What if you don't know the vowel? Well, you take the name of the letter bet, and what's the vowel there? Eh. So bet becomes be. Okay, Gimel, the third letter. What's the base vowel? Well, you look at the name of the letter Gimel, and the vowel next to the G is E. So Gimel becomes Gi. Okay, etc., etc. Samek, this angel name, or this divine name, Samek, you see the base vowel next to the S is Ah, Samek. So you know that it's pronounced Sa. The Hebrew letter Tet, the base vowel in the name of the letter is E, Tet. Te. So you know Sa, Te, or I'm sorry, there's a Yod in between. Yod, what's the base vowel? Well, the vowel in the name of the letter Yod is O. So the pronunciation becomes Sayote. Sayote. Now, I want people to become careful. I mean, I'll become careful. I want people to be careful pronouncing these out loud. First of all, some people see it as disrespectful, and there are a lot of cautionary tales, a lot of warnings that if you pronounce these out loud, at least in an impure state, it could cause problems. And there are different reasons for this. That somehow when you pronounce the name out loud and you're not really internally purified, you're not right with your own conscience, etc., you're not living well, you're not living a purified life. These names are considered so powerful that pronouncing them out loud, unless you're in a really purified state, it's said, I'm just giving the information, that it can create the opposite of what you want. It can create the opposite. And there are different rationales for this. One explanation is that it could unleash the left side of the tree, associated with Gevurah and destruction. Another explanation is that it's like you want a glass of water and you go to the Hoover Dam or some massive waterfall and you get crushed by the force. Now, I don't want to be overly superstitious, but I give the warnings out of respect unless I'm in a like purified state, meaning that I feel right with my conscience. I'm kind of living how I should. I'm helping others. I think it's better to kind of follow the tradition and not pronounce these out loud. You can pronounce them mentally. However, the other side of this, Abraham Abulafia, his whole meditative technique is visualizing the letters and pronouncing them. Sayote, Wahewa. Vehuya becomes Wahewa. The name of Yeliel, Yolayo. The root of Sitael, using base vowels, becomes Sayote. These are the different names of God. I mention them for two reasons. First of all, for information. I want people to have the information. Second of all, I've been living pretty clean here lately. I'm definitely not a saint, but I've been working on things. So, take anything I say with a grain of salt, please. Don't just accept anything that I say. But I want to give all the information. You make your own conclusions. If you want to go pronounce the names out loud, and there's all these warnings, I mean, it's up to you, I'm not your keeper, but I think it's better if there's a warning, there's probably a reason. So, I think we've gone through enough of this part of the video. We have an understanding that the Shem angels come from these 72 names. Before the Renaissance, there are these medieval Kabbalistic sources of the names themselves. And we have the Zohar, the Behir. Abraham Abulafia actually has a meditative technique of visualizing the letters and pronouncing them with breathing and stuff like that. If you want to deep dive into Abraham Abulafia, talking about this method, it's available on Amazon. There's a translation of The Life of the World to Come by Abraham Abulafia, 13th century text. So, we have an understanding of base vowels. And again, I don't want people to get confused. Yes, the divine names are pronounced a little differently than how we normally do the Shem angel names. It's because instead they're using base vowels. So, Sitael, but the divine name, Sayote. Okay? I don't think you need to pronounce it Sayoteel. It's up to you. But the Renaissance sources from Agrippa on, it's pretty consistent. The angel name is Sitael. But Abraham Abulafia using base vowels, the divine name is Sayote. So, let's take a look at the attributes of this angel and the attributes of the divine name. And some people may be like, why are you bringing in Kabbalah? Because the earliest sources for these divine names and the Shem angels were Kabbalistic sources, okay? The Zohar, the Behir, Abraham Abulafia, etc., etc. And the Shem angels, by adding El or Yah, De Arte Kabbalistica. It's a Kabbalistic text. Agrippa. It's coming from the same source. They're often referred to as Kabbalistic angels for a reason. So, we're going to look a little bit at some Kabbalistic interpretations. And we're going to take a look at the Psalm verse that has the different letters of the name. And we're going to look at the attribute. And we're going to look at this from all these different angles. By the way, this is new information. I'm bringing in a lot of material that I didn't do last year. Last year I focused just on the Renaissance material and Linnaean's offices and all of that. Very late 19th century, the offices. But we're looking at things a little bit different here. Let's take a look at the 3 Hebrew letters. By the way, I encourage people, if you're working with the Shem angels, first of all, it doesn't matter if you begin in order. When I started with the Shem angels, I started in like September with Shem angel like 50 or something. I forgot. I started in September. And then I worked all the way through and then back to September, and then I continued. So I did like a year and a half working through them, but I started in September. People can start at any time, and you can work with any Shem angel, any divine name at any time. Okay? The only reason that we're cycling through with the quinaries of the zodiac is for convenience. People find it useful, hitting each angel in a year's initiatory journey. But you're not limited by time. You can call on any Shem angel at any time. It's not like they're off work at a certain hour or day. Again, we're not dealing with the purely celestial realm or astrological realm. We're dealing with the third or highest realm, the intelligible realm that is beyond the stars, beyond these timings. We're dealing with the eternal, the timeless, that which is beyond time and space. So it's not like you call on an angel and he goes, well, I'm sorry, it's the wrong day. I'd like to help you. It just doesn't work that way. That doesn't even make sense, okay? It would make sense if these were purely astrological forces and it purely depended on where things were in the heavens. But anyways, I want to encourage people to work with any angel, any divine name at any time. And I want to encourage people to jump in. If you want to do this Shem Angel journey with us on this channel, and it's not just me. Many of y'all are doing this work and sharing your experiences. Many people around the world that have nothing to do with this channel are doing the same type of process. So many people around the world right now are working with Sitael. Now, I encourage you to jump on in. If you missed Shem Angel 1, Vehuya, and you missed Shem Angel 2, Yeliel, it doesn't matter. Start now with Sitael. Go ahead and start. So, the Kabbalah. And by the way, I want, there are different qualities of Sitael given in Lazar Lenain's office. Of course, that's a late 19th century text. But there are different qualities of the Shem angel, Sitael. But I want to kind of focus on the protective aspect, because the protective aspect you find in different places. It's kind of a repeated theme with this angel, is protection, guardianship. So first of all, hi Liam, how are you doing? First of all, let's take a look at the Hebrew letters. And you're going to hear things a little different than the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn Kabbalah. I just want to stress that I'm not against the Hermetic Order of the Golden, not in any way. But it's like all that people talk about. I think that there's a lot of material that we can glean from classical Kabbalistic sources. You're taking a small plate of food when there's a whole banquet that's unexplored. So I'm not going to be focusing on what the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn had to say. You're going to hear these from a little bit of a different perspective. So let's look at the name, the three letters of the name, Samek, Yud, Tet. Samek. If you look at the letter Samek, this is a great name to learn the Hebrew letters. This is what I wanted to say. I apologize for jumping around. This is a great year. If you're going to work through the Shem angels in a year, this is a great time. It's a whole year to learn the Hebrew alphabet. And it's very easy to do because you're just focusing on three letters at a time. Samek, Yud, and Tet. These three Hebrew letters, Samek, Yud, and Tet. So what I encourage people to do, there are Hebrew alphabet flashcards you can order, like on Amazon or wherever you order stuff. You can get the Hebrew alphabet flashcards that are really good. But what I encourage you to do as and by the way, I put it as the thumbnail of my video, the three letters, read right to left, from right to left, Samek Yod Tet. Um, so what I encourage you to do is draw out these three Hebrew letters and become familiar with them. I encourage people to incorporate a meditative technique, which is ancient, which is mentioned by Abraham Abulafi in the 13th century, of visualizing the Hebrew letters, of pronunciation. This is not New Age. It's not modern. This is very old. It's nearly 1,000 years people have been visualizing the letters of the name. So I encourage people to look at the letters during the time of the angel, during these 5 days, if you're cycling through, draw the letters out, look at them, become familiar. I actually, anytime I work with them, I put it as the background of my phone in my lock screen. Some traditional Kabbalists would be like, but it works. It's constant. Every time I pick up my phone and I check the time, I see the three letters. Visualizing the letters. This is traditional Kabbalah. So Samek means a prop, a support. And again, I'm focusing on the protective quality of the angel. We all need protection. And it's kind of hard to focus on all these, manifesting all these other things if you feel unsafe. Okay? Protection should be priority number one. How can you focus on abundance or love or whatever else, knowledge, if you're not safe? Protection should be number one priority. We all need protection. Second, you don't have to wait for a catastrophe to start doing magic or to start meditating on the divine names. You don't have to wait for a catastrophe. I think it's good to always be doing workings to bring abundance or protection. That way, these forces are working in the background. Instead of waiting for a catastrophe to happen to do a healing or a protection when something bad happens, maybe if you were constantly doing different workings for protection, the bad thing would have never happened to start with. So I encourage people to at least consider a proactive approach to doing workings and magic. Even if you feel totally fine and safe, still do a protection thing with Sitael. So Samek means a prop or a support. That's the first letter of the name, Samek. It's a prop or a support. So we have this idea of being held up, not falling, being held up, propped up, a support. And if you look at the letter, it's shaped kind of like this. It's a circle. Samek makes a circle. And what does a circle do but enclose? It surrounds. It's protective. Samek upholds, it supports, and it protects. A Samek is a circle. That's basically what the letter is if you look at it. A Samek is a circle. And Samek is also the first letter in the word in Hebrew sovev, which means to surround. Sovev means to surround or encircle. And there are two basic aspects of the divine in the Kabbalah. There is the aspect of the divine, sovev kol holam, is the attribute of divinity that surrounds the universe, that surrounds all things. It is the divinity as transcendent. By the way, I'm not trying to push any one religion. I believe that Kabbalah should be for everyone. Whatever your background, you should be able to use these ideas. Okay? So my opinion is you don't have to grow a beard and start wearing a kippah to practice, okay? I think people from any background should be able to work with the Kabbalah. And this is actually getting to gain this attitude of openness to bring everyone in to the Kabbalah is becoming more popular among like Orthodox rabbis and stuff. Yeah, come on in, come into the class. Whatever your background, come on in. And part of this is some of these people believe that we're reaching later times, messianic times, right? And so the whole idea is we need to hurry up and try to repair the world and bring this knowledge and try to help the world to become a better place. So whereas before everything was like hidden, oh, you're not one of us, you're not 40-year-old male, blah, 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 married and all this stuff. Now it's like, well, come on in. So people are becoming more open. So I think Kabbalah is for everybody. Okay, you don't have to switch religions. You can be any religion and learn about the Kabbalah. However, the root texts are in this type of language. Okay, the root source texts are, Judaic sources. But anyway, so Samek is a circle. So we're talking about divinity. But I just want to emphasize when I talk about the divine, I'm talking about the divine presence. Some people may hate on me for it, but when I say the divine, to me, it's the same thing as like the Tao or Brahman or the Tao or whatever you want to call it, right? You can just as easily say the Tao. It's beyond name. Okay, but anyways, there are two Kabbalistic aspects to the divine. There is Sovev, surrounding. Kol means all. Olam, the universe. The attribute of the divine, Sovev Kol Olam, that surrounds the universe. It is that transcendent aspect, beyond anything. And then there is the aspect called Malay Kol Olam. And that's within the unit. That's within. That's at the smallest point. It's at the smallest atom. It's God found in a ballpoint pen, at the tip of a ballpoint pen. It's God found in the tip of your fingernail. It's all present, right? But Samek means a proper support, and it's the first letter of Sovev, to surround. And this idea of Sitael as being a protective power, you get this idea that you were supported and you were surrounded by a protective power. What is a circle used for in ceremony? What is a circle used in ceremony? For protection. And there's a new kind of modern perspective that's also to hold energy in while it builds. But you look in the classical sources, a circle is a protection. We have all these medieval superstitions of putting a circle of salt around the bed of a sick person to keep the bad stuff away while they're sick and while they're trying to recover. So a circle is protective. It's a mark in the dirt around me where nothing can harm me. It's a fortress. It's a fortress of protection. So Samek is a proper, we're supported. It's the first letter in Sovev, which means to surround. We're surrounded by the circle of protection. And also, the gematria of the letter Samek is 60. Samek, the gematria is 60. And there's 60 minutes in an hour. 60 minutes in an hour. And there's 60 minutes in a degree. 60 minutes in a degree. So again, 60 is a full cycle. 60 is a full hour. It's a degree is put into 60 minutes. It's a full cycle. Again, you get this idea of a full cycle or a circling. So that's interesting. We get this idea of protection. The second letter, so that's the first letter. We get all of that just from the first letter. The second letter, Yod. Yod is a point. And it said there's a whole Kabbalah on the Hebrew letters, which again are seen kind of like the Sanskrit alphabet. Each letter is seen to have a certain frequency, a certain resonance. They represent these higher forces. The Sefer Yetzirah says that the universe was made using 10 numbers and 22 letters. It's the foundation of the cosmos. Of course, number gives us quantity, and the 22 letters give us quality. And of course, we can go into the first chapter of Genesis. The word Elohim appears 32 times. Elohim refers to a plurality. The Yod refers to Chokmah and unity. Chokmah and Keter, of course. Chokmah is raw energy, but it's undifferentiated. Binah is where you get distinction, plurality, multiplicity. In fact, the root of the word binah, understanding, binah is bain, between this and that. Binah takes the raw, undifferentiated energy of Chokmah, the Yod, and it differentiates it. It makes it distinct. So the word Elohim, wherever it appears, refers to multiplicity. From unity comes plurality. It refers to distinctions, this and that. So it's interesting that the word Elohim in Genesis 1 appears 32 times. So what are the 32 agents of creation? What are the 32 agents of creation? According to the Sefer Yetzirah, it is the 10 numbers and 22 letters. The 10 Sephirot and the 22 letters, or paths, later it would be interpreted. 10 numbers and 22 letters makes 32. Now it's interesting that in Genesis 1, Elohim appears 32 times exactly. 10 of those, it says Elohim said. They're 10 sayings. Now that's interpreting Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'teretz. The first verse is a saying, but that included is a saying. There are 10 sayings. That's 10 Sephirot, 10 numbers. There are three times that it says Elohim made. Va'asa Elohim. 3 times in the Hebrew that it says Elohim made. That's 3 mother letters. There are 7 times that it says Elohim saw, Vayara Elohim, or Roe Elohim. 7 times it says Elohim saw. That's the 7 double letters. And there are exactly 12 other times that the word Elohim appears. That's the 12 simple or elemental letters. So, it is interesting. These are very precise numbers. 32. Out of the 32, there are 10, 3, 7, and 12. That is extremely specific. It's not like it's 33, or it's not like it's 32, 10, 9, 3, and 12. No, it's very precise. Elohim appears 32 times in Genesis 1. Of those 32 times, there are 10 times Elohim said. By the way, what is a speaking? When you speak, you do it with your breath. Speaking is an exhalation. Clearly, this doesn't look like ex nihilo, out of nothing. This is an outflowing, an emanation. It is a breathing out. When you speak, it comes from your own breath. So Elohim appears 32 times. Of those 10 times, there are 10 sayings. 3 times, those are 10 Sephirot. 3 times it says Elohim made. That's the 3 mother letters. 7 times Elohim saw, 7 double letters, and 12 other times. By the way, the tree of life is composed of 10 Sephirot. 10 Sephirot. If you look at the tree of life, there are 10 Sephirot, and there are 3 horizontal lines, exactly 3 horizontal lines, 3 mothers. There are exactly 7 vertical lines. 7 vertical lines on the tree of life, 7 double letters. And there are exactly 12 diagonal lines, That's the 12 simple or elemental letters. So Genesis 1, the different times the word, the divine name appears, um, and the 10 Sephirot and the 22 paths completely match 10 numbers, 3 mothers, 7 doubles, and 12 simples. This is the map of the Hebrew alphabet or alphabet. So I think it's very interesting. And there is so much more that could be said on that we're just touching the tip of the iceberg. We can go into the letter Aleph being unity, that is before creation, before anything existed. The letter Aleph is silent. Aleph makes no sound. You'll often hear Kabbalists on YouTube say that Aleph is a ah sound. That's not true. That's just not true. That's inaccurate. It's not true. Aleph does not make an ah sound. Aleph is a silent letter. It is soundless. It's silent. If you see an Aleph with no vowel marks, you don't make the sound. If you see 3 diagonal dots underneath an Aleph, that's called a shurik. The 3 diagonal dots is called a shurik. The Aleph then makes a ooh sound. Ooh. If you see 3 dots, ooh. If you see a dot above an Aleph, called a cholim, the Aleph makes a O sound. If you see a little dot underneath an Aleph, 1 dot, that's called a hirik. 1 dot underneath an Aleph, it makes a E sound. You see a little T-looking symbol underneath called a patach, then the Aleph does make an ah sound. So Aleph has no sound, but with vowel marks, it could be ah, e, o, u. So this is very much like Keter. Although soundless, all sounds spring from it. Although it has no color, all colors spring from it. It is beyond all things. It is not A or B. It is not white or black. It is not anything. It's timeless. It's eternal. You can't even say that it's good or bad in our modern, in our everyday understanding. Now, that's a lot to unpack and is a whole other topic. And by the way, when you kind of break it down, it ends up being like, yeah, we should probably do what's right. And we should do what's good for the whole. But that's a whole other, I don't want to go off track on the video. But it's beyond all duality. And so why does the Genesis 1 begin with the letter Bet, the second letter? Bet means house. Bet means house. And just like the body is the house of the soul, the physical body is the house of the soul. The universe, creation, is the house of God. Creation is the house of the divine presence. What is a house? It has walls, a ceiling, and a floor. A house has limitations. A house without walls or ceiling isn't a house. It's not a house. It's not a container. You have to have limitations and restrictions to have a house. Without a floor, you just fall right through. Okay? So the whole idea of a house is it holds something and it has limits. It has walls, a ceiling, a floor. Bet. Genesis 1 begins not with Aleph, the hidden. Creation begins with Bet. The universe is literally the house of the divine presence. The universe is the body of God. And the gematria is 2. 2 refers to distinctions, duality, past and future, hot and cold, distinctions. And of course, the letter Binah begins with Bet, which means between. Anyways, I've gone way off course here, but the letter Yod represents the smallest point. A Yod is the smallest point. A Yod is a dot. And whereas Samek surrounds, it is a circle. And you could think of this idea of support and protection. A Samek is a circle. It surrounds. Sovev kol olam. It surrounds the universe, that transcendent protective power. Yod is a dot. And Yod has the gematria of 10. 10 plus 0 is 1, unity. A Yod is a dot. And it's said that every other letter is composed of a Yod. So these are more than letters. Yes, it's not that the universe was literally made with letters. That's kind of silly. It's that the letters represent these higher forces that are beyond creation. Of course, 32 spells Lev. And of course, we can go into how there are 31 nerves, 31 nerves from the spinal cord. And then we have 12 cranial nerves, which together we count as one. There's 32 nerves. And what is the tree of life? What do nerves do? They allow us to interact with creation, the outside world. We interact, we pick things up, we touch things. We interact with the outside world the same way as the tree of life, the 10 numbers and 22 paths are the way of the infinite to interact with the finite. In the same way, the nerves are the way for impressions to go up to the brain. In the same way that the tree of life is a way for the finite to reach up to the divine or send signals up to the divine, right? So the tree of life is a type of ladder, and there's both an outflowing and a going up. Much like nerves, the 31 nerves from the spinal cord and then in the brain. And I'm not trying to, bring in a bunch of new age hippie stuff. I'm just saying. It checks out, sir. So a yod is a point, and a point is a beginning. And it said all the letters are composed of a yod. When you take ink and you just first start to write, as soon as the pen touches paper, there's a yod, a dot. So when the pen first touches paper, that's a dot, that's yod. So it's the beginning. And whatever you write, it can be an M, it could be a W, an R, whatever, you draw a funny picture, it all begins with that dot, that point, which builds everything else. You could even say, I'm not trying to bring in all this science stuff, but it checks out the analogy. The Big Bang, everything began with the smallest, the whole universe, the whole cosmos, the universe, the infinite galaxies began with a small point that exploded, and it all began. Yod represents divine eminence, the divine that is in the smallest atom, the smallest point. An atom, or particles, the smallest particles, that's a yod. An atom or a particle, a molecule, that's a yod. That's a point. The divine presence surrounds, sovev, and then we have the divine presence within. So the first two letters, samek and yod, and then we have the letter tet. Now, if you look at the letter tet, I'm trying to do it with my hands. It's like this. A tet is a vessel, but it's closed. There's a point that comes down. It's like a vessel, a container, and it's closed. It's concealed. Okay, it's concealed. It has something in it, so you have this protective quality you can see within it. By the way, the gematria of tet is 9. Just like when we are in our most fragile, as in the womb, 9 months in the womb, tet is the number 9. In our most fragile point, we have a container, a protective womb. And then, of course, tet is tov. It conceals. By the way, we all know that Hebrew letters double as numbers. When you write 15, you don't write yod hey, because it's seen as disrespecting the divine. That's how much power is seen to be in the Shemot, in the divine names. You don't write 15 as Yod Hey. To avoid doing that, you write Tet Vav to make 15. Tet is 9, Vav is 6, 9 plus 6 is 15. So instead of writing Yod Hey when you're just writing numbers in Hebrew, you write Tet Vav. Same thing with 16. To avoid writing Yod Vav, which is also two letters of the Tetragrammaton, you write Tet Zion. So that's just a little bit interesting. And by the way, just one other piece of information is that sometimes when you look at the Hebrew letters, you'll see like these three lines poking up. It's like, what is that? Well, I see the Hebrew letter. Why are there these three lines pointing up? These are called tagin in Aramaic. In Hebrew, keterim, they're crowns. And I think there's probably a mystery there. But the Yod has a crown, and the letter Tet has three crowns, three rays poking out of it. So often when it's on a mezuzah or in a siddur or anything that's sacred, you'll often see these tagin or keterim, these crowns. So you'll see like three rays poking out of a Hebrew letter. So if you start to study the Hebrew letters and studying Kabbalah with the Hebrew letters, just know if you see like rays poking out of the top, those are called keterim. So I think we've looked at that enough. An analysis of sayote, or the name root of Sitael, by looking at the letters. Samek, Sovev, it's protective. Yod, the divine presence within all things. Tet is like a protective womb, the way that I express it here. By the way, the letter Tet in Phoenician is because there's a lot of similarities in these ancient alphabets. Phoenician is a circle with a cross inside of it. And some people believe that this Phoenician Tet that has a circle with a cross inside of it may be the source of the Greek theta, a circle with just a horizontal line. Who knows? I'm not a historian of these things. It's just an interesting idea. But anyways, we get this idea of protection. How about the gematria? The gematria of Samek Yud Tet is 79. Now, we have to be careful with gematria because, hi, esoteric boy. Hello, Eagle Mama 84. Hello, Liam, Jeffrey. So 79, you have to be careful with gematria because all kinds of things can add up to something, right? But I do think that there are often legitimate connections. 79 is also Gan, which means garden. Gimel Nun, that's 53 plus 26, tetragrammaton. So Gan, four-lettered name, equals 79. Boaz, Beit Ayin Zion is 79, and it refers to firmness and strength. Again, we have this idea of protection. And Melet, Mem Lamed Tet. Melet is a escape or a slipping away or a deliverance. So again, we have this idea of a protective quality. Now let's take a look at the Psalm verse. All of the 72 divine names, and Athanasius Kircher mentions this in his 1600s Oedipus Egyptiacus, 17th century text, source for the Shem angels, still all in Latin. And earlier, Rabbi Menachem Azaria de Fano, who lived 72 years, by the way, he used the same associations of the Psalm verse as a way to indirectly pronounce the 72 divine names. And these match up. So the psalm verse, which I think can be a clue to this Shem angel, Sitael, or the divine name itself, Sayote. The psalm verse in the Masoretic text is Psalm 91, verse 2. And it is Amor la Adonai Mechesi. And I will say to four-lettered name, I say Adonai, but it's Yud He Vav He. Amor la Adonai. I said to Tetragrammaton, Machasi, my shelter. That's protective. My shelter. Machasi. Umetsudati, and my fortress. My shelter and my fortress. Elohai, my God. Avtachbo. I will trust in him. Of course, this is beyond gender, but this is there's gender like in Spanish with Hebrew. So I will say to four-lettered name, often pronounced Lord in the King James, I will say to Adonai, you are my shelter and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. So the psalm verse associated with Sitael, and traditionally the psalm verse goes with the call, you are my shelter and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. My shelter and fortress. What is a shelter? A shelter surrounds you and it protects you. A fortress is something where if the enemies are attacking you, you can't get in, I'm in a fortress. So my shelter and my fortress. So in the psalm verse, you get this idea of protection. And of course, Samek Yod are in the Hebrew of Mechasi, my shelter, and Avtach, the tet is there, that refers to hope or trust. So the three letters of the root of Sitael in the psalm verse refers to protection and hope. Protection. Now, if we go to the 17th century with Athanasius Kircher's Oedipus Aegyptiacus, the divine attribute associated with this name and with the Shem angel is in Latin Deus Spes, God the Hope. And the Latin Vulgate of the psalm verse says sperabo in eum. I will hope, or I will trust. So this idea of God the Hope in the divine attribute in the 17th century, and I apologize for all the religious language, but that's kind of how people saw it in the 1600s and earlier, So let's go on to modern sources. Lazare Linanes, La Science Kabbalistique. This is what Lazare Linane writes all the way forward in the 1800s. These are the offices that we used last year. Talking about Sitael, rules nobility, magnanimity, and great employment. Protects against weapons and ferocious beasts. Protects against weapons and ferocious beasts. So just my opinion, it says here in the Lazare Linane, protects against weapons and ferocious beasts. This idea of shelter and a fortress of protection in the psalm verse, the Hebrew letters, you go all the way through, it seems like there's a very strong protective quality. But I encourage people to come up with their own conclusions, okay? Take anything I say with a grain of salt, come up with your own conclusions. But yeah, the office in Lazare Linane's Science of the Kabbalah, or Science Kabbalistic in the 19th century, rules nobility, magnanimity, and great employment, protects against weapons and ferocious beasts. Those born, it's talking about the quinary 5-degree section that the sun was in when you were born. Those born under this influence love truth and will be happy to help those who need his or her services or help. So, pretty interesting. By the way, if you want to look at your birth angel, by looking at the quinaries of the zodiac. You need to look at the degree of the sun or the degree of the ascendant or whatever. Don't go by days like Lazar Linane does. It's a horrible, he just makes this up in the 1800s. He just makes it up, and there are 5 days left, which he assigns to Ellen. He just makes this up. In Agrippa and all the older sources, it's the 5 degree sections of the zodiac, the 72 quinaries. It has nothing to do with the calendar. It has to do with astrology. That's why we have leap years. Our calendar, our Gregorian calendar, does not match exactly the zodiac. That's why the solstices and equinoxes are on slightly different days every year. That's why the vernal equinox is not always March 21st. Sometimes it's March 19th. Sometimes it's March 20th. Sometimes it's the 21st. Sometimes it's the 22nd. There is a variation according to year of the degrees of the zodiac. My birth angel, according to Lazar Linane, would not be my birth angel. Look at the degree of your sun in your natal chart. And from that, I mean, you can go with the system he just made up. You can argue that all these people made it up at some point. Whatever, we can debate it till the sun goes down. Me personally, if you're looking for your birth angel, I wouldn't use Lazar Linane's Science Kabbalistic. I would look at your natal chart, look at what degree the sun was in at your birth. But anyways, this angel, Sitael, governs 10 to 15 degrees of Aries, which, by the way, if you look at the decans, or the deacons, some people pronounce it, the decans is sun in Aries. Interesting, sun in Aries, which the sun is exalted in Aries. And finally, we get to one last thing. Wow, an hour and 7 minutes. Thank you for staying with me this long. The last thing, we're going to read Sefer Raziel Hamalak. It's like a paragraph, and we'll be done. Thank you for sticking with me this long. It's like a paragraph. Sefer Raziel Hamalak is a 13th century Kabbalistic text. This is what it says. It's pretty cryptic. This is what it says about Sayote, the three-letter name Samek Yud Tet. It says, guide, this is the three letters, guide the greatest compassion. Be complete or whole by it. By the greatest compassion, become complete, become whole. Justice and righteousness is in the living earth. Justice and righteousness. Bind three powers, guided by the word and image. The powers of the Lord support Beit, which means house or dwelling. Like I said, Beit, house or dwelling. The powers of the Lord support Beit, and Beit is in the middle. The Shekinah, the divine presence, and often seen as like the feminine, a feminine aspect of God, which refers to the divine presence here in Malchut. The Shekinah, dwelling, is in the center of the Beit or house. The Shekinah is in the center dwelling, kind of like Yod and Samek. There are 5 of them. 7 guide to in the place of the living in victory. Live and exist in victory. So I leave that to you to interpret. So we've gone through all of this. Last year I went through Agrippa, went through all these classical Renaissance sources. Now we're starting to look into some of the earlier medieval Kabbalistic material. So I really appreciate y'all, and I encourage people to learn the Hebrew alphabet this year. Try to draw them out well, because this is your reference. You want it to be a good reference. Draw out the 3 letters Samek, Yud, and Tet. Look at them. I encourage people to visualize, do meditations, which is traditional. Abraham Abulafia was talking about visualizing the 3 letters of the name that you're working with way back in the 13th century. It is traditional Kabbalah meditation. I encourage people to meditate on the letters and call upon for divine protection. I actually added that to the title of the video, um, protection. But it governs other things as well. Protection and nobility and magnanimity and all of that. And seeking the truth. Um, so, yep, that's basically it. Most of what I've talked about is new. I don't think I talked about hardly any of this in my video last year. So I'm very happy about that. And by the way, I have a lot of material other than Shem Angels. I actually wanted to do a different type of video. It was Kabbalistic. I'm kind of on a, it's not just a kick. I'm on a definite Kabbalist. I'm going to have a lot more stuff on Kabbalah. I'm obsessed with it. I have to make videos on what I have to do it. This is what I'm into. I have to talk about what I'm doing. It's how I do my channel. So there's going to be a lot more Kabbalah, but I wanted to make a whole other type of video, but I wanted to touch upon the Shem Angel. But there's a lot other type of stuff coming out. So thank you so much for joining me. Work with Sitael and work with the divine name Samek Yud Tet, pronounced with base vowel Sayote. I encourage people to not pronounce it out loud, but do what you will. And I will see y'all in the next video. An hour, 11 minutes, and 11 seconds. 11111. Okay, that's cool. It's just the timing. All right, thank you so much. Jeffrey says, my pleasure. Matt says, thank you. Thank you so much. Much love to y'all. I send y'all my love and my heart. It means a lot to me to do these videos. And it means a lot that I have people that actually want to hear what I have to say. And it means a lot that I can bring something that maybe helps to lighten people's life and help people to become awakened and to change their lives and to do better. So yeah, thank you so much. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. It really means a lot. Thank you so much for joining me and being on this journey with me and doing this together. All right. I'm working with the angel. I'm visualizing the 3 letters every day and I'm doing the work. I encourage y'all to do it with me, all of us together. All right. And we're going to bring the earth towards the heavens and we're going to make the earth more heavenly. We are going to be like conduits, nodes on a network. We are going to be the channel that's going to bring the divine light to try to lift up the world and make it a better place. Thank you so much, and I will see y'all in the next video. Have a great day, y'all.